I met Gina when we were high school seniors at a party. I thought she was the sexiest woman I had ever seen. Her olive skin, dark brown eyes, and black hair were evidence of her Mediterranean heritage. That evening, her hair was pulled back in a ponytail that reached her hips. Her 36 D2335 figure seemed to scream, "Take me!" She seemed very cheerful, even before I spoke to her. I told her one of the best lines of all time. "I don't need to ask if you're enjoying the party." She replied, "You look even better now, sailor. What's your name?" I replied, "Mike, although my volleyball teammates call me Mike Spike." She replied, "Well, Mike Spike, I'm Virginia, but my friends call me Gina." After 3 beers, we walked across campus to my apartment. 3 minutes later, we were in my bed. By the end of the second week, she had practically moved in with me. A few months later, I proposed to her. Some of my friends told me stories about how wild she was, but I wasn't worried. I was like a kid with a new toy when I discovered the joys of college nightlife and immersed myself in the unbridled pleasures of parties where anything goes. In June, we got jobs in Manhattan, finished school, got married, and moved into an apartment in Queens. We didn't have time for a honeymoon, but life was wonderful. We both seemed to love our new jobs and couldn't get enough of each other. On weekends, we spent literally every minute together, and on weekdays, we were together from morning to night. It seemed like I loved her more and more every day. It wasn't just about sex and conversation. We both did little things for each other, gave each other small gifts, and planned special dates on Fridays and Saturdays. The first cloud on the horizon appeared at a Christmas party at Gina's accounting firm. Jack Tomlinson was a manager at her firm, which meant he was 2 or 3 levels above Gina, who was a junior accountant. Not only did he show a keen interest in Gina, dancing with her more than anyone else, including me, but he also seemed genuinely interested in me, asking me questions about my job as a financial analyst at a brokerage firm, as well as about Gina's life and my life in New York. The second cloud was the start of a busy season at Gina's accounting firm. Although Gina was an auditor, not a tax specialist, the first 3 months of the year were very busy because of the large number of firms whose fiscal year ended on December 31st and had to complete their audits and prepare financial statements along with tax returns in the first 4 months of the year. By mid-January, I hardly saw Gina, except on Sundays when she rested after a 70 to 80-hour work week and recharged her batteries for the next one. Sex was limited to twice on Sunday, if I was lucky. Finally, the busy season was over. I had accumulated vacation time, and we decided to postpone our week-long honeymoon and spend it at a resort in the Catskills, with the second week in Saratoga Springs during the horse racing season. We rented a luxury car for the trip. In the city, we used only public transportation and decided not to skimp on our postponed honeymoon. The drive through the Hudson River Valley to our chosen resort in the Catskills was beautiful. When we checked into the hotel, we were full of hope that our romance would be rekindled. The week in the Catskills was everything we had hoped for. We were like lovers who had just met. We took long walks, holding hands, along the many trails, and made love 4 or 5 times a day. The stress our marriage had been under due to Gina's busy season was almost forgotten. We were in high spirits as we drove to Saratoga Springs. Gina Scaletti. I loved my time in college. It was like school squared. The parties never stopped, and there was no curfew. There were lots of excited guys around with their own apartments and separate bedrooms. Of course, we had to tear ourselves away from the parties to go to class. And then there were those nasty hour-long exams. Some of them, like auditing and income taxation too, I had to study for all night. In any case, I managed to get 2 degrees. The first was a bachelor's degree in accounting. With that, I got a good job at a large accounting firm in Manhattan. I started working on my second degree at the beginning of my senior year. I met Michael James at one of the first parties. He introduced himself as Mike Spike. We ended up at his apartment. At 6 feet 3 inches, he wasn't the tallest guy I'd ever dated, but he knew how to use what he had. I decided he was the best I could hope for, and after a few months of living together, he asked me to marry him, and I said yes. I received my Mrs. diploma the week after I received my bachelor's degree in business administration. Mike and I were supposed to start work the following week, so we had to postpone our honeymoon. Mike had a degree in economics with a minor in finance and accounting. That meant he was well versed in the operations of both of our firms. He also worked in Manhattan at a large brokerage firm, not far from my firm's office. Apartments in Manhattan were too expensive, although it would have been nice to live there, so we rented an apartment in Queens. We took the subway to work together, although we didn't always go home together. After a week of orientation, my first real assignment was to work under Jack Tomlinson. He wanted to get to know me, even though my immediate boss was a senior accountant. He was tall, dark-haired, and handsome. I was immediately attracted to him. I'd only been married for 2 weeks, and my eyes were already wandering. On his desk was a photo of a typical American family, a beautiful blonde wife and 3 children of different ages and genders. I suspected that this would only be a minor obstacle to our relationship. He asked me where I lived, what my husband did, where I went to college, and so on. 2 weeks later, he came to the audit site and invited everyone to dinner. I called Mike and told him I would be late, without specifying how late. I felt that I would be back later than the rest of the audit team. We had a drink at the bar and then went to a restaurant. After dinner, we chatted a little more. When the others finished their last round, they left. I hadn't finished my 3rd glass of wine, and Jack and I were the last ones left. He suggested we go somewhere quieter for a nightcap. I agreed and followed him to what turned out to be a company-rented apartment in Manhattan. He poured us another glass. I took a few sips of white wine, put my glass on the coffee table, and looked at him. He kissed me. I kissed him back. Soon we were undressed. It was 9 o'clock, and I knew I had to get home because Mike would be worried about where I was. We took a shower together, and as expected, I got a second round, this time in a ballroom dance position while the water poured down on us from the shower head. We finished washing and got dressed quickly. His car was parked in the garage near his office, and he drove me home. He said he lived further out on Long Island. At that late hour, there were few cars on the road. When I got back to my apartment, it was almost 10. I told Mike that we had gone out for a drink after dinner. Our manager had decided it would be a good team-building exercise. Now I definitely felt like part of the team. Fortunately, Mike showed no signs of suspecting me of anything extramarital. After that, Jack and I met up almost every week for additional team-building activities, skipping them when one of us was busy. Everything was going well until the Christmas party. Jack seemed very interested in both me and Mike. I was a little worried that Mike or Jack's wife might suspect something, but Mike didn't seem to notice anything, and after the party, Jack and I had a great time together. During the busy season, it was easier for Jack and me to justify our meetings to Mike, but harder to hide them from the other members of my audit team, especially the senior accountant. We would agree in advance which evening we would meet, and then I would text Jack when I said goodbye to my colleagues and headed to the apartment where we usually met. After the busy season, everything continued fairly easily. It was easy for me to use my accumulated personal leave to meet with Jack. Mike and I began planning our honeymoon in the Catskills and Saratoga Springs, and Jack and I began preparing a surprise for Mike. Jack convinced me that it was time to come clean. He was sure that if we simply presented our affair as a fait accompli, leaving him no choice, he would accept it as a good cuckold. Although he had only met Mike a few times, he was sure that Mike was right for the role. I wasn't so sure, but I knew that Mike wasn't too pushy and was pretty easygoing when it came to my desires. This confirmed Jack's words. I still loved Mike as much as I had before, even though I was enjoying my affair with Jack immensely. Jack told me that we could increase the frequency of our meetings to several times a week and invite Mike to join us for sex parties if he accepted what we were doing. When the busy season ended, Mike and I went back to having sex 15 times a week, and even more, and I was sure that our marriage was strong. I didn't feel guilty about my relationship with Jack because I was sure Mike was getting as much sex as he could handle. It cost Mike nothing but the time I spent with Jack, since I was more than willing to have sex with both of them. Since I had more free time, I booked all the tickets for the trip to the Catskills, as well as transportation. I was going to use the time in the Catskills to soften Mike up. Jack booked a large room at a great hotel in Saratoga Springs and was going to pay for that part of our trip. Part of our trip to the Catskills was wonderful. Mike was the sweetest and best husband in the world. He was closer than any other man to completely satisfying me night after night. The days were pretty good. We went on long hikes, holding hands, talking about our lives, the past, the present, and the future. I knew I had chosen the perfect man to spend the rest of my life with. I still wasn't ready to tell him about Jack. I decided that my strategy would be to have Jack help me introduce him to the life I wanted to live. I know it's not good to have secrets from your partners, but this was a big secret, and I had kept it from Mike for a long time. Jack knew almost everything about Mike, and Mike knew almost nothing about Jack except that we worked together. The drive down the Hudson River Valley to Saratoga Springs was wonderful. The console prevented me from leaning against Mike, otherwise I would have. He drove the entire 2 hours. I was a little nervous thinking about the surprise Jack and I had planned for him, but I knew we would be there soon. I asked Mike to drive past the Adelphi Hotel to check something. I told him it would only take a minute. Mike. When Gina asked me to stop at the Adelphi Hotel, I was surprised. I knew nothing about the place except that it was expensive. I pulled up to the entrance and she ran inside. A minute later, she came out arm in arm with Jack Tomlinson. What was he doing there? All I knew about Jack was that he was married with 3 children and was a manager at Gina's company, holding a much higher position than her. She opened the back door of our rental car and asked, "Mike, do you remember Jack from the Christmas party? Looks like he's at the races too. I told him we'd give him a ride." It was one of those moments when you sense that something is not right. I had no doubt that she had told him we would give him a ride. The question was how long ago she had told him. I know coincidences happen, but I don't believe she accidentally ran into him. Then I realized she was getting in the back seat with him. Another coincidence? As we started our short drive to the racetrack, she kissed him, and it seemed like a very deep kiss to me. They leaned back in their seats and he put his arm around her. The next surprise awaited me when we arrived at the racetrack. Gina said, "Be a sweetheart, Mike, and drop us off at Gate D. Here's your ticket to Gate D and the 1863 Club. Isn't it nice of Jack to get us tickets to the 1863 Club? We'll order you a whiskey sour." Jack added, "Thanks, buddy. We'll be on the first floor." So I had to find a parking spot myself and then walk to Gate D. Great, Gina. What other surprises do you have in store for me? I dropped them off and watched them enter Club 1863, then drove in the opposite direction to find a parking spot. Unfortunately, the Club 1863 parking lot was full, and I had to search for a long time to find a spot. By the time I got to Club 1863, it was over half an hour later, and I needed 2 whiskey sours. After I was let in, it took another 10 to 15 minutes to find Gina and Jack. They were sitting at one of the 50 tables for 8 people. There was 1 seat left on the opposite side of the table from Gina and Jack. There were no 2 whiskey sours. There wasn't a single whiskey sour. However, Gina and Jack had drinks. I went to the bar and bought a cocktail. Drinks at Club 1863 weren't cheap. Okay, back to the table where my beloved wife Gina was still being harassed by Jack on her right and some guy on her left. I could have asked the guy to move, but that would have been difficult. Gina seemed to be enjoying his company almost as much as she enjoyed Jack's, so there was no point in helping her. My afternoon entertainment consisted of periodic trips to the buffet to buy more drinks or place bets. During the breaks, I watched from my front row seat as Jack and Lefty, as I nicknamed the guy to the left of Gina, fondled and groped her, and she giggled with excitement. It was a long day. Not only do all good things come to an end, but so do the bad ones. Finally, the 11th race was over. At the end of the day, I had won 2 races, lost about $40, and had doubts about the future of my marriage. Now, Gina and Jack showed great interest in me as I walked them to their car. Gina directed me to the Adelphi again. Gina asked the concierge to take our suitcases to the Whitney room, and Jack handed $20 bills to the valet and the concierge, but gave nothing to the driver. Jack suggested we have a drink and discuss our plans for the evening. We ordered drinks, which Jack asked to be charged to the Travers room. Apparently, the Travers and Whitney rooms could be combined into one super deluxe suite, and Gina informed me that Jack had paid for both rooms. We sat down at a table in the bar. Jack excused himself and went to the restroom. I asked Gina, "What the hell is going on?" She replied, "Don't you appreciate Jack paying for everything?" I replied, "I do, but what the hell is going on?" She continued, "You need to decide what to do. I'll give you a few options. Option A, you sleep in Whitney's room, Jack sleeps in Travers's room, and I divide my time between you. Option B, we all sleep together in the Travers suite. Option C, you act like a wimp. Jack and I sleep in the Travers suite, and you sleep alone." I asked, "Gina, how long have you been sleeping with Jack?" She replied, "I think you can handle the truth, Mike. The truth is, since the beginning of the stressful season." I told her, "I don't quite understand what you mean by handle the truth, but I can tell you that I have serious issues with you sleeping with Jack behind my back for over 6 months. She replied, "I love you, Mike. What I did with Jack didn't affect you, at least not until you found out." I responded, "So it didn't affect the time you spent with your loving husband." She admitted, "Maybe I spent a little less time with you, but we probably would have spent that time watching TV or doing our own thing." I told her, "Maybe I'm being a jerk, but I'm definitely leaning toward option C." She replied, "Come on, Mike, don't think it's a little immature." I suggested, "Maybe I'm just an inexperienced guy. I don't feel the same tenderness toward you that I felt this morning." Then she said, "I'm going to sleep in the Travers room. If you want to join us or want me to join you, let me know." With that, she went into the other room. On the way, she got a call and answered, "Travers." She may have said something else, but I couldn't hear through the closed door. I watched TV. The soundproofing between the rooms wasn't very good, so I heard women laughing, sighing, and men's voices all night long. Gina, why was Mike acting like a jerk? Maybe I should have backed off a little. I didn't want to tell him about my relationship with Jack because I was afraid he wouldn't accept it. I probably shouldn't have been surprised by his reaction, but his attitude was about him, not me and my needs. When Howard called, I invited him to join Jack and me, making sure he went to Travers's room and not Whitney's. We had discussed this possibility when we met at the 1863 Club. Mike. The next morning, we had breakfast on the terrace. I was introduced to Howard Phillip, another guy who had been sitting next to Gina at the 1863 Club and had apparently joined Jack and Gina in Whitney's suite the night before. I limited my interaction with the other 3 to one-word answers. After breakfast, I told the other 2 guys that I wanted to talk to my wife alone. Howard said goodbye, kissed Gina, and shook hands with Jack and me. Jack said he would be in his room. I asked, "What's wrong, Gina? Are we breaking up?" She replied a little coldly, "You're still the man I want to spend the rest of my life with, although you haven't done anything lately to deserve it." I replied, "If earning points with you means being a willing cuckold, then I'm out. Thanks a lot." She said, "I think you're acting like a jerk, Mike. Why won't you work on this with me?" I asked, "Do you know what day it is today, Gina?" She replied, "Of course, it's Tuesday." I said, "Not only is it Tuesday, but it's also our first wedding anniversary, and you spent it with 2 men, neither of whom is your husband." She replied, "I'm very sorry, but that's irrelevant, isn't it?" I replied, "Yes, it does. The real problem is that we have very different views on how a wife should behave." She said to me, I still want to be your wife, but I am who I am, and that's not going to change. I explained, I think it's time for me to go home. You can come with me if you want. She replied, I think I'll have more fun with Jack. You seem boring to me. I agreed. Yes, I'm boring, and so are you. When will I see you at our apartment? She replied, probably in a day or two, depending on what Jack decides. I asked, just let me know when you decide what you're going to do. Bye, Gina. She looked at me very intently. I thought I saw a tear or two. It shouldn't end like this, Mike. She seemed to realize the seriousness of what she had done and what she was doing. I told her straight out, it has to end like this if you choose Jack over me. She asked, if I come back to you now, do you think we can make it work? I replied, if Jack is part of our relationship, I don't see how that's possible. She cried and said, goodbye, Mike. I said, goodbye, Gina, and left the terrace to close my suitcases and head home. About a third of the way back to Manhattan, Jack called me. He said, hey, old man, can we talk? I said, what's going on, Jack? He said, I'm really sorry this happened. I didn't want to break you and Gina up. I replied, I believe you. It will be easier for you and Gina if you stay married. He continued, you have to understand what Gina is like. I explained, I've been close to Gina for over a year and a half. I think I know what she's like. He replied, but you don't know the whole picture. Gina is a wonderful person. I would gladly marry her if I didn't have a wife and children. I think she can make you happy for the rest of your life, but you have to understand that she is a very sexual woman. The fact that she still needs to have fun has nothing to do with you. If it were up to me, I wouldn't be able to satisfy her either. I couldn't do it on my own. It's up to you, but I think the good outweighs the bad. I replied, that's your opinion. On top of everything else, last night she added to Howard's story. It's too much for me. I'm sorry, Jack. I don't agree. He kept insisting, how about this? Gina and I will stay here for another day and night. That will give you a chance to think things over. Here's the gist of my proposal. You and Gina and I will meet up. You can take as much as you want. You can watch Gina and me or join in. I think if you see what's going on, you might feel a little better. I hope you'll enjoy a full-fledged threesome with us. Think about it. And when we get back to the city, maybe from Yonkers or White Plains, Gina or I will call you, okay? Reluctantly, I agreed. When you call me tomorrow afternoon, I'll tell you what I think. I'm just agreeing to think about your offer. I may say no. Deal? He replied, that's all Gina and I are asking. Just think about it, man. Drive safe. He hung up. Gina. I was a little angry with him for making me choose, so I decided to stay with Jack. I knew it wouldn't help our relationship. I guess I wanted a little more threesome action, since I knew Jack would be free and Howard would be home later that afternoon. Still, I knew I had made a bad decision for the future of my relationship with Mike, and tears began to stream down my face, betraying my upset state. Jack comforted me as best he could. He assured me that he didn't want to break us up with Mike. He came up with a plan to solve Mike's problem, and we decided that in his current emotional state, he might be more receptive to Jack's idea if Jack called him. After the call, Jack told me that Mike had agreed to meet with us when he got back. I felt much better, and looked forward to another fun evening with Howard and Jack. The next day we left late, but we were already approaching the Bronx when I called Mike. Mike! When I hung up after talking to Jack on the way from Saratoga Springs, I realized what they were hoping for. They both knew I loved Gina, and they were counting on my love to overcome my anger once I cooled down. In the meantime, I was going to call my divorce lawyer. I wasn't going to make a final decision until I talked to Gina again. It seemed like much more than a day had passed before I got a call from Gina the next day after lunch. Hi, Mike. I missed you. You know I love you. What decision did you make? I explained. I'm still a little angry that you cheated on me for 5 months. I haven't made any decision except that I'm willing to meet with you and Jack here. The only reason I invited Jack is because you dragged him into our relationship." She replied, "I'm so sorry, Mike. I guess I did the wrong thing. I'm so glad you agreed to meet with us. We'll be there in an hour. Anything else?" I replied, "Nothing comes to mind. See you soon." I hung up and prepared some snacks to eat while we talked. When we got together, Jack and Gina seemed very relaxed, but there was tension in the room. I chose a chair next to a small sofa, and they sat on the sofa. I poured drinks for everyone, including wine for Gina. Gina began. "I was thinking about you on the way from Saratoga Springs. I love you very much, Mike. If we can find a way to satisfy my sexual needs, I think we can be together for a long time. Is there any option that would be acceptable to you, Mike? Right now, I feel alienated from you, and I hate that feeling. Please, Mike, I'll do anything." I replied, "Except stop sleeping with Jack, I suppose." She replied, "I'm sorry, Mike. I'll stop sleeping with Jack, but I need something on the side. It doesn't have to be Jack, but it has to be someone." I added, "Jack seems to think I like watching him use you." She said to me, "That's not true, Mike. I'd rather you watch Jack and me than sneak up behind us and peek." I gave in. "Okay, Gina. You're the sexiest woman I've ever met. I'll try to watch you two do it. If I can't stand it, I'll leave." "Thanks, Mike. Will you be wearing clothes when you watch?" I replied, "I plan to stay dressed unless at some point I decide to join in." She continued, "Where will we be?" I replied, "I think the master bedroom is the best place, but I want you both to leave your clothes here." Gina asked, "You don't mind that it's our marital bed?" I replied, "I don't care." Jack interjected, "Isn't leaving your clothes here a little kinky, Mike?" I explained. "Where you leave your clothes is up to you, Jack. After all, you're our guest. But Gina has to leave her clothes here. I want to see her run naked across the bedroom to get to her lover." Gina. Mike didn't seem unfriendly when I called him, and he was at least neutral about our planned meeting. He greeted us warmly. He agreed only to talk with us. When I explained that if he agreed to watch, it would be primarily for my pleasure, he seemed to soften his hard stance. He agreed to watch Jack and me make love in the master bedroom, but only if I left all my clothes in the living room. I don't know if he knew how turned on I would be by the thought of walking into the master bedroom naked while he and Jack watched. Mike. I decided I could live with Jack having a threesome 2 or 3 times a week, and we made up. A few years later, we decided to start a family. I wasn't sure it was the right decision, but I guess I chose the path of least resistance. It seemed that my life with Gina would be spiced up with frequent threesomes. I decided that as long as all the children were mine, everything would be fine. Even after she got pregnant with Lincoln, I wondered if I had done the right thing by staying with Gina. It seemed that sex with Jack 2 or 3 times a week was enough to keep Gina at home. I felt a little better when Sandra was on the way. When she got pregnant with Martin, we decided our family was complete, and she started taking birth control again. While we were trying to have a family, she used a diaphragm when Jack was around. After 7 years and 3 pregnancies, Gina decided she'd had enough of accounting. She was still a senior accountant and didn't look like she was going to become a partner. She took a job as an assistant controller at a clothing company. After her company changed auditors, our relationship with Jack cooled off a bit, although we continued to have threesomes with him for a few more months. He was getting older and became a partner at the accounting firm. After that, we had threesomes with different partners, but none of them lasted more than a year or 2. This went on for several years until she met a call girl at a conference who was with an accountant from another city. Behind my back, she tried working as an escort with her new friend for a few nights. She decided to quit her job as a controller, even though she was in line for a vice president of finance position, and work as an escort 7 days a week. This was clearly beyond the limits of my patience, especially since she not only disregarded my feelings, but also didn't think about her children who were already 11, 12, and 14 years old. We got divorced. We agreed that she would take care of the children on weekdays from when they got home from school at around 3 in the afternoon until she left for work at 7. I took care of the children the rest of the time when they weren't at school. When I got home at 6, we sometimes had dinner together. This arrangement worked well. I soon discovered that going to the park with the kids was a great way to meet single mothers. That's how I met Melody, who had daughters aged 10 and 11. They were about the same age, so they could play together while Melody and I chatted. We talked about this and that, and soon we were going to museums, zoos, and the beach together. Our outings turned into adult dates. A year after we met, we got married. She was a manager at an advertising agency. Although I earned less than she did, I was still a manager at a brokerage firm. We continued to use her babysitter, who now took care of my children when neither Gina nor I could. Over the years, Gina began to earn fantastic money in her profession. Although she continued to pay modest child support, she seemed less and less interested in the children, who were now in high school and college, and I began to spend more time with Melody and her daughters, especially after Melody and I got married. Gina didn't come to Lincoln's graduation, and I haven't seen her since. We spoke on the phone a few times, and she helped Sandra and Martin with college expenses a few times. But that was all she did. She never met her children's spouses and never saw her grandchildren, at least as far as we know. Looking back, I think it would have been better if I had left Gina as soon as I found out about her real plans for Saratoga Springs. Of course, I wouldn't have 3 wonderful children from Gina, and I probably would never have met Melody. I think everything worked out well. But I'm a little sad that it took me so long to find Melody. The moments of happiness we enjoy catch us by surprise. We don't grab hold of them, they grab hold of us. Ashley Montague. It's been more than 25 years since I returned to my hometown. 26 years, 5 months, and 12 days to be exact. I left town a broken man at the ripe old age of 26. It was the day after I found out that my wife, with whom I had been married for 3 years, was pregnant with her first child. More accurately, her boss's child. When she told me she was pregnant, I knew right away that it wasn't my child, even though she didn't try very hard to hide it. We were young and poor. The economy was tough, so I took a temporary job on a river barge that traveled up and down the Mississippi. It was great money for a young man, but I had to be away for 6 to 8 weeks. It ended up being 9. We both decided it was worth it because I was making more in 2 months than I had in 4 at my old job. We were young and in love. We could have made it work. My wife lasted about 2 weeks, and then she started sleeping with her boss, David Hollister. He owned an insurance company, and she was one of 3 administrative assistants. As it turned out, she was the 3rd one he had slept with. He had good connections in our small town, so even when she made a scene, he just smiled. "What are you going to do, Debbie? Ruin my life? Sue me? I'm not married. The local judge is my brother-in-law, and you don't have a penny to hire a lawyer." The next day, when he fired her, he gave her $1,000 as severance pay. When I returned to town 2 weeks later, she was working as a waitress at a local cafe, serving breakfast and lunch. When she told me this story, she was so remorseful that it was pitiful. She apologized for 15 minutes, then insisted that we use my recently acquired $12,500 to sue the bastard. "Tom, we can fix this. It didn't mean anything. I was just lonely, blah, blah, blah." She babbled on and on while I stood there silently and stoically. She admitted that it didn't mean anything, meant that she had slept with him about 20 times while I was away. I think she was genuinely shocked when she fell silent, and I laughed bitterly in her face. Turning away, I spent the next hour in silence, did a couple of loads of laundry, then packed my things and left for good. In the late 90s, cell phones were a luxury, so she couldn't find me. I never saw her again or heard from her. Yes, I was angry, hurt, humiliated, and broken. I would have loved to figure out how to get revenge on that bitch and that bastard, but as a young man with very little experience, I didn't know how or what to do. My parents were dead. I had a sister in Chicago, so there was nothing keeping me in beautiful Hannibal, Missouri. I got another job on a barge, bought a used Ford F-150 pickup truck, and headed west. For the next 20 years, I struggled to get by. I eventually landed a job as an accountant at a small title company in Denver, where I worked for 3 years and earned a degree in finance. Being single, or at least living like a bachelor, I had a lot of time to study and take classes, so I earned my degree in just over 2 years. I had no idea if Debbie would divorce me or when. I'm sure she did, but I never found out. With a few letters after my name and a few dollars in my pocket, I continued west, this time settling in Bend, Oregon. I didn't know anyone there, but I had read about the place, and it seemed like a great place to start over. Golf and mountain biking in the summer, skiing in the winter, it was perfect for me. I was also sure that there wasn't much migration from Hannibal to Bend, so I could really start my life from scratch. I opened a small brokerage firm, and within 10 years I had 3 junior partners and several administrative staff. I was making almost $200,000 a year, and my life was going great. I made good friends and dated girls as often as I wanted. With Debbie's betrayal still fresh in my mind, I didn't even think about marriage. When colleagues asked why I didn't want a wife and children, I never told them the whole story. I just shrugged and said something like, "It's not for me." Over the years, I still thought about Deb from time to time. It was impossible not to. We had dated for 2 years and been married for 3. For most of those 5 years, I thought I had found the woman I would spend the rest of my life with. When I found out she had cheated on me with her boss and was carrying his child, it was more than a shock. I didn't want those painful memories to make me bitter, so every day I tried to focus on the best in the world and do everything in my power to be a good and generous person to those around me. So, despite my success and leaving the past behind, I am now flying Delta from Portland to St. Louis, and then on a small plane to Hannibal. Why? It turns out I have a long-lost uncle on my mother's side who died and left me a small fortune. Somehow, his lawyer tracked me down in Bend. We discussed it over the phone, and although I was inclined to just let him handle everything remotely, I decided why not go back to the old house one more time. So, at 51, a completely different person, I set out on a journey down memory lane. I'm still a bit stingy, but since I was about to inherit $40,000, I decided to fly first class. When I settled into my seat, a charming young woman of about 25 sat down next to me. Her name was Tabitha, and she was flying to visit friends in Bender. The trip was a gift from her mother for her 25th birthday. By the time we flew over Nebraska, we were talking like old friends. Her mother was single when she was born, but married a local high school teacher when she was about 2 years old. Unfortunately, he molested several underage female students and was not only fired, but also ended up in prison. When Tabitha was 12, her mother married a local businessman. They lived in a beautiful house until Tabitha went to college in Missouri. In her junior year, her mother caught Mike with his secretary, and that ended the second marriage. At that point, her mother decided to remain single. As we drank wine and chatted, she told me that she had earned her accounting degree and was working in St. Louis. She saw her mother at least once a month. It was clear that she loved her mother, but also thought she was a little foolish. Obviously, she didn't know how to choose men, and her relationships hadn't helped Tabitha learn how to build loving and stable relationships. During our conversation, I noticed something intriguing in her eyes, but I couldn't figure out what it was, so I didn't dwell on it. She asked me a few questions about my life, and I told her everything except for my early marriage and divorce. I just didn't want to talk about that with anyone, especially a young woman who was almost half my age and whom I had just met on a plane. She seemed satisfied with what I told her and didn't press me to continue the conversation. By the time we were approaching Kansas City in the last hour of the flight, I also realized that young Tabitha had issues with her father. We only had a couple of glasses of wine, but she leaned into me as we talked, more than was appropriate, and it was clear she was flirting. When she asked why I didn't have a wedding ring, she looked at me as if to ask if I was interested. To be honest, I liked that a young woman was flirting with me. I'm in good shape, fit, and fairly outgoing, but no 20-year-old girl is going to be interested in a man who could be her father. Right? Tabitha was now openly touching my hand and said she had a couple more days before she had to go back to work. She asked if I wanted her to keep me company on the trip to Hannibal. She could surprise her mother and visit her, and show me how her hometown had changed. There was a clear sexual undertone to her offer. One of my favorite sayings is, "I may be ugly, but I'm not stupid." When we landed, I bought Tabitha a ticket from St. Louis to Hannibal. The flight was not full, so I got her a seat next to me. There was no first class on this small plane, but the flight was only 40 minutes. As soon as the plane took off, the lights dimmed. When you fly west to east, you fly into the night, so by the time we took off, it was late and dark. And then Tabitha leaned over and kissed me. It wasn't a passionate kiss, but it was hot. I took her hand in mine and whispered, "If you behave like that, I'll punish you when we get home, young lady." I could feel her burning when she whispered back, "I hope you do." We landed 20 minutes later. I rented a beautiful house overlooking the Mississippi, not far from the city. It was too late to call her mother, and neither of us was in the mood to part. Tabitha stayed the night at my place, and I went to meet with my lawyer. We both agreed that meeting her mother was not a priority. Tabitha didn't think her mother would be furious to see that her daughter had decided to have an affair with a much older man, but she also knew it was better to be cautious. She broke off the kiss and asked for some time to take a shower. We had almost 7 hours to drive, so I agreed that was a good idea. I offered to wash her back, but she smiled slyly at me and said I would have to be patient while she got ready to please Daddy. Damn, who was this young coquette, and would I be able to survive the night with her? Tabitha did not disappoint. "What should Daddy do to you?" She started walking toward me, swaying seductively. "Bad girls deserve to be punished, Daddy," she replied, sliding down my knees. When we woke up, we had sex in the shower, then got dressed and went to breakfast. It was Saturday, and she knew her mom wasn't working, so she decided to call her after breakfast. Eric Hodges, the lawyer representing my uncle, agreed to meet with me at 10 a.m. on Saturday, as our case would only take about an hour, and he would be paid $5,000 from the inheritance to complete it. Tabitha and I agreed to meet later for drinks and dinner. She told my mother she was going on a date, but didn't tell her about our situation. She gave me the name of a restaurant where we could meet and offered to make a reservation, as it would be crowded. Then we were going to go home for the night, and in the morning I was going to fly to the airport, and she would continue her visit with my mother. I told her I would buy her a ticket back to St. Louis, but she thought her mom would want to take Monday off and drive her home. We had a plan. As we were leaving, Tabitha stood up and kissed me gently on the lips. "I can't wait to see you tonight, Daddy," she whispered. Damn, I thought. Good thing it's only for the weekend or I'd never get back to Bend. I used my GPS to find Hodge's office. It was downtown, in an area with shops and restaurants. I found a parking spot just around the corner and walked into his office at exactly 10 a.m. He was waiting for me with a smile and shook my hand. We chatted for a few minutes about life. When he asked about my family, I told him that I had lived here many years ago. I didn't go into any details about my past other than what was necessary. When we got down to business, everything turned out to be relatively simple. My uncle's will allowed us to avoid the probate process. Hodges took my driver's license and made several copies for his files and records. Then he read the will aloud. When we were done, he handed me a money order for $40,765. After a few final pleasantries, I left the house and headed for my car. As I turned the corner, I looked up and saw Tabitha a block away with an elderly woman who must have been her mother. They were talking and giggling, oblivious to their surroundings, so they hadn't noticed me yet. I froze. I was looking at my ex-wife, Debbie. I hadn't seen her in 25 years, and she looked older, but I would have recognized her anywhere. Suddenly, I realized why Tabitha had caught my eye. Her eyes were exactly like her mother's. They crossed the street about half a block away from me, still unaware of me, and entered a clothing boutique. Damn it! I slept with my ex-wife's daughter. All the emotions from those long-ago years came flooding back. I broke out in a cold sweat, my hands shaking. The creature who had betrayed my deepest love, who had robbed me of the joy of life with a real partner, was in a damn clothing store across the street, completely unaware of my presence. The pain was unbearable. Then suddenly, like a bolt from the blue, I started to laugh quietly. I remembered all the moments I had spent in agony thinking about how to punish that bitch. A year after moving to Bend, I decided to let it go. I knew I would never have a chance to get revenge. Whatever happened to that flighty girl, it would happen without my involvement. I wasn't going to let her betrayal completely destroy me. I may have been deeply traumatized, but I was okay, even if I had to give up the idea of revenge. The more I thought about it, the more I laughed. The few people on the street probably wondered why I was laughing so loudly. When I leaned against the car, still laughing, I realized that my laughter wasn't laughter of relief, but laughter of malice. I realized that I wasn't going to be chivalrous or kind to Debbie. I wasn't going to leave things as they were. I was going to enjoy this moment. Perhaps a more mature man would have reacted differently. A real nice guy would probably have decided that enough time had passed and forgotten about it. But not me. I realized that I wanted a little revenge, and that this was my moment. I didn't want to hurt Tabitha, but perhaps that was unavoidable. I would try not to be cruel to her. She couldn't blame herself for who she was born to be. However, I was going to enjoy causing my ex a little pain. I crossed the street and waited about 4 houses away from the clothing store. When they reappeared, I headed toward them. The next 5 minutes would never make it into a Hallmark movie, but God, was it fun. "Tabitha, hi Tabitha," I called, waving my hand. I saw her look up, a little confused. We had agreed that I didn't need to meet her mom. Her expression was a mixture of surprise and slight alarm. At first, Debbie looked at me the way anyone would look at a stranger who was clearly a friend of her daughter's. When I approached them with a smile, Debbie's eyes went from curiosity to confusion to recognition to shock in about 10 seconds. She put her hand over her mouth and exclaimed, "Oh my God!" "Tom?" Now it was Tabitha's turn to be confused. "Mom, do you know this man?" Before she could say a word, I said, "Hi, Debbie. Long time no see." Oh, that felt good. "Tom, what are you doing here? I mean, why are you here and how do you know my daughter?" "Mom, you know Tom? Tom, you know my mom? How is this possible? What's going on here?" They were both confused. "Well, ladies, let me explain. Tabitha, I'll start with you. 5 minutes ago, I didn't know that my fickle, lying ex-wife was your mother. We didn't discuss this on the plane last night, but I was married here many, many years ago. Debbie, interrupt me if you want to add anything." "No? Okay, I'll continue. You see, Tabitha, your mother was my first and only love. We were young and poor, but we loved each other. To make ends meet, I took a job on a river barge and was away for 9 weeks. Before I left, we both agreed that it would be hard, but we loved each other and would get through it. Every day on that barge for 2 months, all I could think about was my Debbie and getting back to her. I was so happy when I got paid and headed home. Finally, we could start our life together. Imagine my surprise when my loving, caring wife, who had promised me fidelity, told me she was pregnant by another man. As we talked, I realized she had waited only 2 weeks before sleeping with her boss, your father, David Hollister." Both women gasped. "Oh," I continued. "Debbie, you never told your daughter about her real father. Well, that's too bad. Maybe that's why she has issues with her father, which are clearly evident when she's having sex." I thought Debbie was going to faint. "Anyway, honey, your mother ruined me and our future by spending several weeks in bed with her boss. In the end, he gave her $1,000 to leave and keep her mouth shut, which she obviously didn't do. Technically, I guess that makes her a slut, not a prostitute. I left town with a broken heart, and it took me almost 5 years to get back on my feet and start a new life. So, I guess that answers your question. Now, Debbie, to your questions. I came back to town because I had an uncle I never knew, and he died leaving me a small inheritance. I decided to come back and see my hometown one last time before finishing up with attorney Eric Hodges. I didn't know you were still living here, and I wasn't going to look for you. Why would I want to reunite with a selfish bitch who didn't give a damn about me or my love? Anyway, on the plane, I sat next to a beautiful young woman who introduced herself as Tabitha. We chatted over a glass of wine and enjoyed getting to know each other. She didn't tell me your name, and I had no idea who she really was. However, as I said, we had a great time and really liked each other. Again, I think that may be partly because she's still looking for a loving father. So last night we flew to Hannibal, and she spent the night having incredible sex with me. I mean, it was truly epic. I don't remember ever making love with such passion and enthusiasm." Tabitha blushed and was now clearly angry. Debbie was humiliated, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I was almost done. I looked at Tabitha. "Tabitha, I'm sorry you're hurt and angry right now, and I don't blame you. But you have no idea what real pain is. It turns out I betrayed you a little. I could have seen your promiscuous mother, turned around and walked away. But I'm just not that good of a guy, and in many ways that's thanks to the bitch you call your mother. Know that I will never speak of this again, and I don't hold any ill will toward you. I hope you have a good life, and if you ever find yourself in Bend and need a friend, I'll be there. No strings attached. You are a beautiful young woman, and I'm sorry you've been through this. I think your answer will be a resounding no, but I would still like to have dinner with you tonight, with no physical expectations." Tabitha's face softened a little. "Debbie, your tears and pain are healing me. I thought I would never have a chance to show you how much you hurt me. I could never have come up with a plan like this. But now that I'm here, I want you to know that I see the horror in your eyes. Now you understand, at least a little, what you did to me. I can see it in your face, and I know it hurts like hell. Your little girl is a wonderful young woman, and she's damn good in bed. I hope the image of me taking her several times last night will remain in your memory forever. Goodbye, girl." Later that day, my phone rang. "Dad, are you still going to have dinner with me?"